Happy Friday the 13th, Scream Team, Zach Cherry here, and today we're going to do a quick and dirty Friday the 13th franchise ranking, this time based on what the Rotten Tomatoes scores are. This has been a bit of a requested video of mine. I already did the Rotten Tomatoes franchise rankings for Halloween and Scream, so I'm not going to do any fancy editing or any of that shit that I usually do. I'm just going to go right into it. I've got it on my screen here. I've got the Rotten Tomato rankings that are going to be on the top here, then the audience score, which is going to be in the middle, and then my own personal rankings based on the video that I did back in, I guess it was 2020. And just a caveat that was a while ago. Like, my mind is always changing on a lot of things, especially the Friday the 13th franchise. So this isn't necessarily reflective of what my current opinion is, but it is reflective of that video I made a year and a half ago. So I'm just gonna go by that for the purposes of this video. So based off of the Rotten Tomatoes scores, the movie that is in 12th place is Friday the 13th Part 3 with 7%, which is ridiculous to me because this is one of the more iconic ones of the franchise. It does have an audience score of 42%, so that's just very reflective of the difference there between, how the audience feels about it and how the critics do. Critics' consensus: Jason may solidify his iconic wardrobe in this entry, but Friday the 13th Part 3 lacks any other distinguishing features, relying on a tired formula of stab and repeat. They're not wrong here. I feel like this movie pretty much does everything that the two before it did, only it's so generic. There's nothing that really distinguishes it apart from the rest of them, besides the fact that it's in 3D. And I've never had the privilege of seeing it in 3D, so I don't really know what all the hubbub is about. But I definitely don't agree with this being in last place. Okay, there's really only two reviews that are tomato rather than a splat. This one says, without the 3D, it's nothing to get excited about. So, I guess they're just pretty much, I'm foreseeing what is being said about this movie. And just as a negative one, let's see, it was great on the big screen in 3D, but there's really no reason to watch it on video, so more of the same. And then according to the audience, the last place movie is Jason Goes to Hell, and that's got 24%. So let's just go ahead and put for critics or Rotten Tomatoes Part 3, we'll go there. Audience said Jason Goes to Hell is the lowest, and surprise, surprise, I'm also going to say that Jason Goes to Hell is the last place movie. This is based on my ranking, obviously from a year and a half ago, but I still feel the same. I don't think that Jason Goes to Hell being in last place will ever change. So in 11th place is Jason Takes Manhattan, and that has 12% on the tomato meter with an audience score of 27%. Critics' consensus: Jason terrorizes a ship and nearly sinks the franchise in a clunky sequel that feels like self-parody without the charm. I don't want to say that this movie is without its charm, because it is. There's a certain charm that comes with the Paramount Friday the 13th movie, so the first 8, this being the last of those 8. But the problem with this movie for me is that it's so, it's long, for one. It's probably the longest runtime of any of the movies, and you can feel it in the pace. And most of it is taking place on the boat, but nothing really exciting is ever happening. And there's just so much, I hate the characters, Rennie, and what the fuck is her boyfriend's name? They're the worst. So I don't get excited about having to watch them and their journey to eventually getting to New York. But let's see what the reviews are saying. Okay, for positive, for what it's worth, very little. Probably the best in the series. Okay, Trevor Johnston, this is the best Friday the 13th for what little it's worth. And then director Rob Hedden may have been onto something from Crystal Lake to Manhattan. The series itself was always drowning in, I'm assuming that is shit. And then, according to the audience score, Jason X is actually in 11th place with 25%. So let's go ahead and put Jason Takes Manhattan in 11th. I don't know how I'll do. I guess I'll do it here. Can I move that? Yeah, just the one at the front will be the best to whatever is at the back, which is the last. So, and then Jason X was the the audience score. And then actually I agree with Rotten Tomatoes, just in terms of like where my ranking falls, because I also said that, where is it here? Jason Takes Manhattan is 11th place. So yeah. And then in 10th place for the Rotten Tomatoes, they said Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. It's got 16%. It's got an audience score of 24%, which we already went over. And I just want to see what the critics' reviews are saying. Here's a bright, shiny red tomato. Although it may not be a good Friday the 13th movie by whatever strange standards that is reckoned, Jason Goes to Hell works reasonably well on its own terms as a supernatural thriller. How though? Let me tell you a thing about this movie. I get 45 minutes into it, and that's, I think, around the time where you get that big exposition scene where Steven is in the prison cell with Creighton Duke, and he's explaining the whole thing, and I still have no idea what's going on, because up to that point, there has been no movie. The only thing that happens is Jason gets blown up by the FBI. So then, according to the audience, in 10th place is Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, with 26%. So let's just go ahead and put those into the chart here. Jason Goes to Hell, right, and that goes at the front there. So audience said part 5, and then I actually said, and maybe this is controversial, but I just cannot stand this movie, and that's Freddy versus Jason. That was my 10th place pick for this franchise. So, I'll talk more about it when we get to what Rotten Tomatoes has to say. Ninth place, lo and behold, is Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, with 18%. If you are curious about classic 80s horror and need a gateway into the genre, though, this should be the first movie you check out. No. Okay, here's the thing. This is one of the movies that I would reevaluate whenever I do another ranking, because I had this very low. This might actually be where I put it. I don't remember. But this is one that I definitely appreciate more and more as I watch it. But I don't think that this is your gateway into 80s horror. Losing its star and story motivation was only the beginning of the trouble. Most of the rest amounted to poor decisions. I'm assuming they're talking about Jason. I feel that like initially my response to it is more so just kind of like how it was kind of built to be a murder mystery, more akin to the first Friday the 13th, but it was never successful in that regard. So I didn't mind so much that Jason wasn't there. I can see why that would annoy people, and I understand and respect that, but I don't think that that's, clearly there have been worse Friday the 13th movies where Jason has appeared in them, in my opinion. So what was that, 9th place? So in 9th place for audience, it is going to be Jason Takes Manhattan. Okay, so let's put that into the thingy here. So that goes there, and then Jason Takes Manhattan goes there. And what did I say? I'm pretty sure, yeah, I had A New Beginning. So that is not reflective of how I feel now. I can tell you that New Beginning is way higher up for me, but just in respect to the ranking that I did back in 2020, that's what we're going with. And then in 8th place with 19%, Rotten Tomatoes says it's Friday the 13th, the final chapter, which has a 51% audience score. So already I'm not happy about this. Not that I give a shit, honestly. People can feel a way about a movie that they want. It doesn't bother me, but for the sake of the drama of this video, I'm annoyed by this score. Critics' consensus: as lumberingly single-minded as its homicidal star, Friday the 13th, the final chapter adds another rote entry to an increasingly labored franchise. I don't even know what that means. This 4th chapter goes long in changing characters, and somehow it survives being decent. Full review in Spanish, which I do not speak, so we'll just skip that. This time out, as if it mattered, the crazed Jason once again stomps through the woods of a lonely summer camp, carving up all the nubile young camp counselors as usual. The open ending prepares bloodlustful viewers for another sequel. I feel like all of these negative reviews are pretty generic. Like, you could pretty much cut and paste them to any of the Friday the 13th movies. So that's why, like, anytime I see a review for a Friday the 13th movie, I don't take it seriously, because I think for the most part, and when we are talking about like professional critics, I don't even think they watched it. And then in 8th place for audience score is Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, with 37%. So let's put that in there. The final chapter, Part 4, the final chapter, and then Part 7 for audience score. And what did I say? I said Jason X. That has probably changed. I don't know. Well, another one I'll get to when we get to the Rotten Tomatoes opinion, which is just right now. So they've actually said that Jason X is 19%, audience score 25%, as we know, and the consensus, Jason goes to the future, but the story is still stuck in the past. I mean, what did you expect? Anyway, by now, despite the 9 years since the last Friday the 13th sequel, Jason and his hockey mask are as predictable a franchise as McDonald's. Moviegoers know what they are going to get. I don't think that's not a bad thing. Anytime you like make a comparison to McDonald's, that just sounds delicious to me. And a positive. As far as the Friday series goes, this is more fun than anyone had any right to imagine. It's fun. It has fun. I just think that it's just so shoddy looking. Like, that's the thing. It's shabby. That's my gripe with this movie. But anyway, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7th is Part 3 for audience, 42%. So let's put that data into the chart. What did I say? No, I remember what I said. I said Jason Lives. This is like the most controversial take that I've find people find with my rankings. And this surely has moved down for me as well, because I love Part 5 way more than Jason Lives. But again, we'll get more to that when we get to the Rotten Tomatoes. And then in 6th place, Friday the 13th, 2009, with 26%, with a 46% audience score. And the consensus, though technically well-constructed, Friday the 13th is a series rehash that features little to distinguish it from its predecessors. I don't necessarily agree with that. Like, there's definitely homage-y stuff thrown in there, but this is really like the most polished looking Friday the 13th, just in terms of like what the remake trend was doing at the time. So it does distinguish itself apart from those movies for me. I think that there is a lot to love about this movie. I don't think that there's anything necessarily to hate, but there's definitely things that do feel like they didn't really take any risks. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say here. But I will say that to me, this distinguishes itself apart from the other movies, because this actually feels more like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or at least like the remake. It's the same director. If you're a diehard Jason fan like myself, check out the movie with popcorn and a group of friends. If not, sit this one out. You know what, Candace? You are realistic. I like your take on this. Unlucky for almost everyone, it's a sad day when a Friday the 13th remake is shown up by a My Bloody Valentine remake. Couldn't they at least have sprung for 3D? I don't agree with that. I think that this was way better than the My Bloody Valentine remake, which was just generic as fuck. Anyway, what are we at? 6th? So that would put also this movie in 6th. With 46%. So, putting that in here, the remake seems like it is considered very middle of the road for this franchise. I personally myself put in 6th place Friday the 13th Part 3. Anyway, moving along, in 5th place we have Friday the 13th Part 2 with 27% on the tomato meter, 48% audience score. Critics' consensus, Friday the 13th Part 2 sets the template for the franchise to follow, with more teen victims, more gruesome set pieces, and fewer reasons to keep following along. I just like comparatively to the first movie, I think that this one does everything that did, only exponentially better. I think that the only thing that this movie is missing that the original had is Betsy Palmer. And even then, she is in it. She has an appearance, a cameo at the end. So if anything, this like gives you more of a reason to follow along, because this really sets the franchise in motion. Even like going back to the original, that in and of itself is a complete ripoff of Halloween. The thing with Friday the 13th, though, is that really became the gold standard for all of the 80s slasher movies, because that then became the movie that all of these other directors and producers wanted to emulate and make into their own franchises. And the thing is that most of those movies don't go any farther than a first movie, because whatever the movies were that were copying Friday the 13th Part 1 were just taking all of the worst parts of what Friday the 13th was doing, whereas Friday the 13th was kind of hitting the right notes. Like, they were doing all of the things that they should have been doing. And that's why this franchise has endured so long. So I think, especially when it comes to Friday the 13th Part 2, that was an instance where they actually improved upon everything, because they recognized what they did right with the first one and what they did wrong with the first one, and just went ahead and made a better sequel, in my opinion. And then audience is also on the same page, saying Part 2 with 48%. So that was 5th place. I forget what I put. I'll have to check here, but we'll go ahead and put those in there. Part 2. What did I say? I says 2009. So this is where I put the remake. So pretty much on par, just a little bit better than where everyone else put it. And then in 4th place, the critics have put Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, with 32%, and 37% as an audience score. This might be the closest we've come to a critics and audience percentage. As lumbering and bereft of conscious thought as its unstoppable star, Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood finds the franchise in desperate need of the title ingredient, The New Blood. Okay. This one is fun to me. Obviously I have this a little higher on my list, as we'll get to, but this one gets a lot of shit. And I think that clearly there's a lot of tampering with production, or just in terms of Paramount and also the MPAA, which, basically took all of the kills out of this movie, or, cut them down to nothing. But just in terms of like the story, I feel like this one is a lot more dynamic than what we've been used to, just because, you have the character of Tina with the telekinetic powers, and you've got like every archetype that you could possibly imagine made into a character that Jason would kill. It's just a fun movie, and I think that this is Jason at his best, just in terms of like his appearance and everything that they did to make him look that way. And then 4th place, the audience have said Freddy versus Jason with 50%. Clearly, I'm in the minority, because a lot of people seem to really love Freddy versus Jason, because Rotten Tomatoes and audience have it way higher than I do. So maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to admit that, my opinions don't always mesh with, the general consensus, but I stand by, how I feel about that movie. I think it's not great. And actually, here we go right now, because in 3rd place is what the Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter is saying, 41%, and the consensus: fans of the 2 horror franchise will enjoy this showdown, but for everyone else, it's the same old slice and dice. I don't know if it was because like maybe I had hyped myself up way too much for this movie, because it had been in the making for so long that when I was introduced to the horror genre, which might have been in the mid 90s, that I knew about the concept of this movie. Obviously it was introduced at the end of Jason Goes to Hell, but I think by the time it finally happened, I think maybe it's just a case of it just being 10 years too late. If it had come out in 1994 or whatever, right after Jason Goes to Hell, when Freddy and Jason were still kind of like at the top of their game, like it might have been, good, but just because the early 2000s for me are just such an awful time for the genre, that everything about this, like just the soundtrack, the CGI aesthetic, the acting, it all kind of culminated into this big, bloated, very unfortunately written script that really just it didn't do anything for me. And just before I prattle on for way too long, it may not be an all-time classic, but it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp blade finger. Fair enough, I'll give them that. And let's see. Director Ronnie Yu loses energy when it shifts to the dumb teen protagonist, and the script faithfully wallows in cliches so ridiculous they border on scary movie territory. Actually, that's exactly what I said, only summed up more succinctly and articulate than I could ever say by just rambling on about words. So thank you for that, Brian Thomas. And then in third place for audience score, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, 51%. So let's go ahead and put those in... Wait, are we at third or fourth? Shit. Okay, I totally confused myself because I realized that I did not put my fourth place movie in when we were doing this. So yeah, that was actually the original. I had the original in fourth. And I actually just watched it this past week because I don't know if you know, but I have a podcast channel. So we did Friday the 13th. Go check it out. I'll put a link and all that so you can find it. But I enjoyed it. It's obviously a very vanilla movie. It's got its boring stuff, but like I had already said before, of just like what it had done for the franchise, I think that it deserves a higher spot. There's less in this movie that offends me than some of the later sequels. And then, sorry, getting back to where we were at with Rotten Tomatoes, they said Freddy versus Jason in third. Audience said Final Chapter in third. And then in third for me, I think I had The New Blood. So yeah, I definitely fucked up on that. But now we're good. Now we got everything right here. In second place, the Rotten tomato meter is 46%, audience score 52%. Friday the 13th, part 6, Jason Lives, indeed brings back old Voorhees along with a sense of serviceable, brain-dead fun. This is the thing with this movie. Like, it's fun. Like, it shifts into a new territory for this franchise. But the thing is, like, it shifts gears too much and too late into the franchise for me, because we've already established a tone for the first 5. And that's a tone that, like, I really enjoyed. I liked that, you know, the movie still took themselves seriously. There are goofy characters, but with this movie, I feel like it's almost like it's just trying too hard. I don't get excited about this movie, and I don't get excited when I watch it. But since I don't want to make this about just like bad-mouthing Jason Lives, I'll just move on and get to what the reviews say. While there's a superficial been there, done that, why don't we just mock the whole thing quality to this entry in the series? It certainly lives up what has become by this point a stale franchise. I understand that. I agree with what they're saying, because things were getting stale, and certainly if this, you know, is so many people's favorites, then it was a step in the right direction. But then I ask you this, why did they not continue going in that direction after this one? Because The New Blood kind of reverts back to, you know, the tone of the first 5 movies. So if there was something successful about Jason Lives, it was not continued on after that. So that's always been confusing to me if someone wants to explain that. This may be my favorite of the Friday the 13th series, mainly because of the winking inside humor. It's almost like a precursor to Wes Craven's Scream 10 years later. I get that. I just think that it's not, like, Scream is so intelligent, and I feel that none of the humor ever lands for me in this movie, and that's probably why I don't respond to it as well, because it's not my brand of humor, so I don't find it funny. So then in second place, the audience has also Jason Lives with 52%. So let's just go ahead and, like, admit, like, this is everyone's second favorite movie, but it's not mine, because I had... What did I have? I had part 2 in second. Get in there. Part 2. For all the reasons that I said before. Obviously, Friday the 13th part 1 is both the Rotten Tomatoes and audience scores first place, which, I mean, if you talk to anyone in the horror community or on like YouTube, like people hate this movie. They don't hate it, but they're just like, it's boring. It's not like it probably falls way lower down on most people's rankings. But here it's 63% and then 60%. And mind you, I think that those are the only scores that are both a tomato and a full popcorn thing. Let me just confirm. Yeah. So this, I mean, not that it's by a huge margin. Well, I guess like a 17% jump here. But yeah, this is one of the things, because like for me, Friday the 13th, like as much as like for everything it did with the franchise and the genre, I don't think that the movie really started off like in the best spot. Like with Halloween, John Carpenter made a movie that was very hard to live up to, and that's why you just get those diminishing returns with every sequel. Whereas I feel like Friday the 13th, they kind of went in with like a blank canvas, and then every movie afterwards added a little bit to it, and like some more successfully than others. But I feel that the series didn't really hit its stride yet, and I feel that for me, it hit its stride with the final chapter, obviously my first place. But critics' consensus, rather quaint by today's standards, Friday the 13th still has its shares of bloody surprises and a 70s holdover aesthetic to slightly compel. And then, for all its shoddiness, the film manages just barely to achieve its ignoble goals. It delivers what it promises. That might be a reference to the original marketing, because Sean Cunningham like initially just made this poster for the movie before they even had a script or a writer in that case, and just said Friday the 13th, the scariest movie you'll ever see, or something like that. So I think in that regard, that's what they're talking about, because there was a lot of hype for this movie before it even came out. Betsy Palmer, cast as Mrs. Voorhees, delivers the most embarrassing performance found in any film in the franchise. Matt Brunson, sir, I disagree with you wholeheartedly, and I actually hate you a little bit too for that. That's so disrespectful. This is Betsy Palmer. This might be the best performance of the franchise, but to each their own. Anyway, let's go ahead and put this in here. So Rotten Tomatoes, Friday the 13th 1. Audience score, Friday the 13th 1. Zach score, final chapter. So yeah, take a good look at that. That is what Rotten Tomatoes thinks of it. That is what the audience thinks of it. And that is what this humble YouTuber's opinion is of it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for enduring all of that with me. If you want to check out more Friday the 13th content, I'll link a playlist over here. Other than that, I will be back very soon with the Who Killed Who in Scream 5. Until then, I've been Zach Cherry, and I'll be right back.